Okay, so, we keep hearing these rumblings in the tech world. Broadcom bought VMware. Things are
Yeah.
changing fast. But how are these changes impacting companies like yours? And what does it mean for the future of virtualization? That's what this deep dive is all about.
Absolutely.
You've given us this stack of articles and reports on the ripple effects of this acquisition.
Right.
We're going to break down what's happening from the company perspective and the customer perspective.
Yeah.
And get this, some companies are seeing VMware costs triple or even increase by over 1,000%.
It's crazy.
So we're going to dig into why and what options are out there for folks.
Yeah. You know what's really fascinating here is that Broadcom's strategy with VMware is it's a bit of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, they're streamlining their offerings. They're focusing on what they see as the most profitable segments.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's creating a lot of uncertainty and even anger among some customers.
Absolutely. And so let's start by unpacking what Broadcom has actually done with VMware since the acquisition. Like, what's the real story behind these price hikes everyone's talking about?
Yeah, well, the biggest change and the source of a lot of the frustration is the end of perpetual licenses. So VMware used to offer this option, where you'd pay a larger sum upfront and essentially you own the software.
Right.
Broadcom has done away with that. They've moved everybody to a subscription model.
Okay.
Which means instead of that one big payment, you're now looking at recurring costs.
Okay, so that's a shift in how they're selling the software. But what does that mean in terms of actual dollars and cents? Like, how much more are people paying?
Well, that's where it gets interesting, and for some a bit alarming. Broadcom has also bundled products and raised prices significantly, and we're not talking about small incremental increases either.
Yeah.
Gartner, the research and advisory company, is reporting that some customers are seeing costs 2 to 3 times higher.
Ouch. I can see why people would be unhappy about that.
Yeah.
It's one thing to change the payment model, but to significantly increase the price at the same time,
Yeah.
that's bound to create some pushback.
Absolutely. And we're seeing that pushback in very real ways. Take Lakeland College in Illinois, for example. They're a community college, so their budget is already tight. Their VMware costs went up by 300% with no added features.
Wow.
The IT director there was quoted as saying that, they're accountable to taxpayers.
Right.
And they simply can't justify that kind of increase.
That makes total sense. You have to answer to somebody when you're spending public funds.
Yeah.
A 300% increase without any additional value would be hard to swallow for anyone, especially, a publicly funded institution.
And it's not just smaller organizations feeling the squeeze. Either we're seeing large enterprises pushing back as well. AT&T, the telecommunications giant, is actually suing Broadcom over a proposed price hike of over 1,000%.
Wow. So it's impacting both ends of the spectrum, smaller organizations with limited budgets and huge corporations who are used to negotiating, favorable terms. What's Broadcom's response to all this? Have they addressed these concerns at all?
So interestingly enough, when asked for comment, Broadcom declined to directly address specific customer concerns. They instead pointed to the CEO's blog posts, which, while discussing their overall vision, won't specifically tackle these pricing issues.
So a bit of a PR dance there, talking about the big picture without addressing the elephant in the room.
Right.
But actions speak louder than words, right? What does this tell us about Broadcom's strategy with VMware?
Well, some industry analysts speculate that Broadcom is deliberately shifting their focus to large enterprise clients who can absorb these higher costs. And it seems to be a bit of a pattern with Broadcom, prioritizing larger, more profitable customers.
And how is that impacting the companies who have traditionally relied on VMware but might not fall into that large enterprise category? What are their options?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, and that's what we're going to be diving into next.
Let's do it.
So faced with these price hikes, you might think, okay, the logical step is to just migrate away from VMware.
Right.
Right? There are other virtualization platforms out there.
Exactly. It seems like a no-brainer, right? Vote with your wallet and move to a provider who's more aligned with your budget.
But here's where it gets tricky. Gartner's research warns that migrating from VMware can be incredibly complex and costly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they estimate it could take a large company anywhere from 18 to 48 months to fully transition.
Whoa, that's a huge undertaking. So we're talking about potentially years of planning and testing and implementation. What makes it so complex?
Well, VMware has become so deeply integrated into many companies' IT infrastructure over the years.
Right.
It's not just a matter of swapping out software.
Oh.
You might need new hardware. You could face early termination fees on existing contracts.
Right.
And even experience reduced productivity during the transition as your team learns a new system.
Yeah.
There are so many hidden costs and complexities that can really derail a migration project.
So it's not a decision to be made lightly. Even with these higher costs from Broadcom sticking with VMware, might be the lesser of two evils for some companies.
Yeah.
At least in the short term.
You're absolutely right, especially for companies that don't have the resources or the risk tolerance for such a lengthy and complex migration. But that doesn't mean there aren't tempting alternatives emerging that can offer a smoother transition.
Okay, so let's talk about those alternatives. What are some of the options companies are exploring?
One company that's really making waves is HPE. They've launched VM Essentials, or VME for short,
Okay.
a virtualization platform aimed directly at those disgruntled VMware customers.
VME, interesting. Is this a completely new platform or is it built on something existing?
It's actually based on proven technology from HPE's acquisition of Morpheus Data.
Okay.
They were a company that specialized in managing virtual machine across various environments, including, you guessed it, VMware.
So it has that interoperability built in. That's clever. It could potentially bridge the gap, allowing companies to manage both their existing VMware setup and explore HPE's alternative without ripping everything out and starting from scratch.
That's one of the key advantages. Another is the pricing model. HPE VME is priced per CPU socket,
Okay.
not per core, which can be significantly cheaper, especially for certain server configurations.
Right.
And they're also offering tools to help customers migrate away from VMware completely if they choose to do so down the line.
So HPE is really positioning themselves as the white knight riding in to rescue VMware customers from these price hikes. But let's be honest, this isn't just about virtualization, is it? It feels like there's a bigger game at play here.
You're sharp to pick up on that. HPE is very much pushing a hybrid cloud strategy with their GreenLake platform.
Okay.
This allows companies to manage workloads across both private and public clouds, giving them flexibility, choice, and potentially better cost optimization.
Right.
They're not saying abandon VMware and come to our cloud. They're saying let us help you manage your entire IT landscape, no matter where your work modes live.
That's a compelling proposition, especially in today's world, where companies are increasingly adopting a multi-cloud approach. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? But what are the chances companies will actually make the switch? What's HPE doing to make themselves stand out?
Well, HPE's betting big on this strategy, and they're pulling out all the stops. They've even built quantum-resistant encryption into their latest ProLiant Gen 12 servers.
Wait, quantum-resistant? Like protecting against hackers with super advanced quantum computers? That sounds a bit like science fiction.
It might sound futuristic, but the threat from quantum computers is very real, and HPE is taking a proactive approach ensuring long-term data security for their customers. This is a huge selling point, especially for industries dealing with highly sensitive information.
Okay, so help me understand this. How does this quantum-resistant encryption actually work? Is it really that different from traditional encryption?
So traditional encryption relies on mathematical problems that are difficult for classical computers to solve.
Okay.
But quantum computers, with their vastly different way of processing information, could potentially crack these codes in a fraction of the time.
Oh, wow.
Quantum-resistant encryption uses entirely different mathematical algorithms that are designed to be resistant to attacks from both classical and quantum computers. It's like building a vault with multiple locks of completely different designs, making it that much harder to break into.
That makes sense. So HPE is future-proofing their servers and their customers' data. That's a pretty compelling argument. But back to their overall strategy, are there any other moves HPE is making to try to grab market share from VMware?
There are even rumors swirling about a potential HPE acquisition of Juniper Networks.
Oh, wow.
If that were to happen, it would significantly bolster their networking capabilities and give them a more comprehensive solution to compete directly with VMware's offerings. It's definitely something to watch closely.
So HPE is shaking things up, offering an alternative, pushing a hybrid cloud approach. But what about Microsoft? Are they just sitting on the sidelines watching all this unfold?
Not at all. Microsoft is a major player in this space with their Azure Stack solutions.
Okay.
Azure Stack essentially brings Azure Cloud services to your on-premises environment.
So companies can have that cloud-like flexibility and scalability, but still maintain local control over their data and infrastructure.
Precisely. You can run virtual machines, Azure Kubernetes Service for containerized apps, virtual desktops, and even data and AI services locally with Azure Stack. They're also developing a new edge infrastructure solution that's optimized for smaller devices and full AKS integration.
So many options to choose from. This Broadcom VMware shakeup is really creating a lot of movement in the market. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's rewind a bit. You've mentioned containerization a few times.
Right.
For those who might not be as familiar, what exactly is containerization and how does it differ from virtualization?
It's a great question and an important distinction to make. Imagine virtualization as building separate houses, each with its own infrastructure. That's a virtual machine, a self-contained operating system running on top of your physical server.
Okay, that's a helpful analogy. So what's the container analogy?
Think of containers as apartments in a building.
Okay.
They share some resources like the building is plumbing and electricity, but still have their own individual space.
So they're more lightweight and efficient because they're not replicating the entire operating system.
Exactly. Containerization is particularly well suited for modern cloud-native applications, especially those using microservices.
Okay.
That's where you break down your application into smaller, interconnected components. It's much more efficient for these types of apps because you're not wasting resources on redundant operating systems.
So when choosing between virtualization and containerization, it really comes down to the specific application and your needs, right?
You nailed it. Virtualization is still very relevant, especially for running multiple operating systems supporting legacy applications or when you need strong isolation between environments.
Right.
Containers are a powerful tool for modern application development and deployment, especially in a hybrid or multi-cloud world, but they're not a one-size-fits-all solution.
It sounds like the lines between these two technologies are blurring a bit. And the cool thing is they can actually coexist, right? You could have virtual machines running containerized applications within them.
Absolutely. It's all about choosing the right tool for the right job, and the cloud has made these technologies more accessible and intertwined than ever before.
This is a lot to take in. We've covered a lot of ground price hikes, migrations, new platforms, hybrid cloud strategies, and even quantum-resistant encryption. But it's not just about the technology, is it? It's about what this all means for businesses like yours trying to navigate this rapidly changing landscape.
That's exactly right, and that's what we'll explore in our final segment. We'll take a step back look at the big picture, discuss the potential implications of this Broadcom VMware shakeup, and leave you with some key takeaways to consider as you make decisions about your virtualization strategy.
Okay, so taking a step back and looking at the big picture, what remarkable is how this Broadcom VMware situation is like shaking up the entire virtualization landscape,
Right.
forcing companies to reevaluate their needs, explore new technologies,
Yeah.
really think about the future of their IT infrastructure. It's like someone hit the fast forward button on the evolution of cloud computing.
It really is. It's a wake-up call for the industry, and it's pushing some trends that were already underway into overdrive.
Right.
Think of it as like a catalyst for change.
Like the shift towards hybrid cloud and containerization, we talked about those as potential alternatives, but it seems like they're becoming more than just alternatives.
Yeah.
They're becoming like the preferred approach for a lot of companies.
Absolutely. Companies are realizing that relying solely on one vendor or one technology,
Yeah.
it can be risky, especially in a world where things are changing so quickly.
Right.
A hybrid cloud approach where you combine private and public cloud resources offers more flexibility, resilience,
Right.
and potentially even cost savings. You get the best of both worlds.
And containerization plays nicely into that hybrid cloud world, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Containers are highly portable. They can run on premises in various public clouds or even at the edge.
Right.
This makes them a perfect fit for companies embracing that hybrid or multi-cloud strategy.
Okay, I can see how this all connects. But what about the companies who are stuck with VMware for now?
Right.
Those who can't migrate right away but are facing those higher costs? What can they do to kind of weather the storm?
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in, and honestly, there's no easy answer. Some might try to negotiate better terms with Broadcom,
Right.
but that might be difficult given their apparent focus on larger clients.
So what are their options? Do they just have to kind of grit their teeth and bear it?
Not necessarily. One approach is to look for ways to optimize their existing VMware environment,
Okay.
get the most out of what they're already paying for.
Right.
This could involve consolidating virtual machines, carefully analyzing their actual resource usage,
Right.
and potentially renegotiating their support contracts.
Okay.
It's about being smart and strategic with what you already have.
Squeeze every bit of value out of what you're already committed to.
Exactly. And while they're doing that, they can start exploring these alternatives and planning for the future.
Right.
The key takeaway here is that the landscape is changing rapidly, and companies need to be proactive, not reactive.
Be ahead of it.
Don't wait for things to happen to you. Anticipate the changes and be ready to adapt.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
This deep dive has given you a glimpse into the forces that are shaping the future of virtualization. It's not just about technology, but also about business strategy, vendor relationships,
Right.
and adapting to a rapidly evolving market.
It is.
The decisions you make today about your IT infrastructure will have ripple effects for years to come.
It's a lot to consider. What's one thing you'd recommend our listeners do right away based on what we've discussed?
Start by having honest conversations within your organization.
Okay.
Assess your current reliance on VMware, your future needs, and whether a hybrid cloud or containerization strategy makes sense for you.
Yeah.
Don't just assume that what's worked in the past will continue to work in the future.
Great advice. Don't just assume everything will stay the same. challenge those assumptions and be open to new possibilities.
Exactly. And keep an eye on HPE. They're making aggressive moves and could become a dominant player in this space, especially with their focus on hybrid cloud container management and that quantum-resistant security. It's something to watch closely.
They're definitely one to watch. But before we wrap up, I have one more question. It feels like we're talking about like a gradual shift, right? A move away from traditional virtualization towards a more cloud-centric world. But what if this Broadcom VMware situation accelerates that shift dramatically? What if it becomes like a tipping point?
It's a fascinating thought, and it's entirely possible. What if this becomes the catalyst that pushes companies over the edge, so to speak, and forces them to adopt these new technologies much faster than they initially planned?
It would be a massive disruption, but also an incredible opportunity for innovation.
Right.
The companies that embrace this change rather than resist it could gain a significant competitive advantage. They could leapfrog ahead of those who are clinging to the old ways of doing things.
Exactly. This is just the beginning of a very interesting chapter in the world of IT infrastructure. The choices you make today will have ripple effects for years to come. So be informed, be strategic, and be bold.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the rapidly changing world of virtualization. It really feels like we're at a turning point. Broadcom's moves with VMware have definitely shaken things up, and now companies are scrambling to figure out what's next. But as we've discussed, this isn't just about reacting to one company's actions. It's about recognizing a larger shift that's been underway for some time, a shift towards hybrid cloud containerization, and a more flexible, adaptable approach to IT infrastructure.
It's an exciting time to be in this industry. There's so much innovation happening, and the possibilities are endless. The companies that embrace this change, who are willing to experiment and push the boundaries, will be the ones who thrive in this new era of computing.
So keep learning, stay informed, and don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. This deep dive has given you the knowledge and the insights to do just that.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep innovating, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the world of virtualization and beyond.